All right. So it is 1 p.m. on Tuesday, May the 5th, 2026. This is Indiana Tech MBA 6320, Leading Global Projects. We're in Module 3, and I'm your professor, Dr. Michael Pierazio. So let's jump right into week 3. So in this module, we're going to be focusing on planning and initiating project management process groups with emphasis on applications to global projects. And in the modules, the learning objectives for this week are several. First, we want to outline the necessary steps in initiating and planning a global project. We want to describe common enablers and barriers to initiating and planning a global project. And you want to be able to describe current best practices in initiating and planning a global project. And week 3 activities. This week we have a discussion post. First, enablers and barriers to initiating and planning global projects. And this first post is due by Thursday, midnight. And then we have Module 3, Assignment 1 is a presentation, steps to initiating and planning a global project. And Assignment 2, global project success, initiating and planning. And finally, like we do every week, we have a Tech Live session. Again, that's just a brief paragraph after attending the Tech Live or listening and watching the recording, interacting with your fellow students, and so on. Other than your first discussion post due Thursday night, all the other work is due by Sunday, again at 11:59 p.m., and that's your local time. So in your discussion post this week, you're going to need to choose a peer-reviewed article about a global project and discuss the enablers and barriers identified in the article during the initiating and planning stages of a project. You're going to want to present what you think are the top 3 enablers during the initiating and planning stages of a project and explain your reasoning. And then you're going to present what you think are the top 3 barriers during the initiating and planning stages of the project and explain your reasoning again. And then finally, can enablers become barriers? Why or why not? And as we do every week, discussion post comes in 2 parts. Your first initial response is due again on Thursday, 11:59 p.m. And your posts or your feedback to 2 of your classmates is due on Sunday by 11:59 p.m. Again, that's your local time. All right, so that's the discussion post for this week. So basically, you have to read the assignment text and then answer the questions, and then you're good. So this is pretty straightforward, I think. Anybody have any questions on the discussion post? Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I'm going to go to a different document that I want to review with you just quickly because it has information that will definitely help you. Let's see. All right, so I am now sharing what is known as project management process groups and knowledge areas. This is page 25 of the PMBOK Guide version 7. Let me make this a little bit bigger. And I will put this in the announcement too. I'll put this attachment in there so you don't have to try and find it or look it up. But this is, everything really that we're going to be talking about tonight and your assignment has to do with. And I use this, even for myself when I'm managing projects, just to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything or the detail that I need from project to project is thought through all the way, because every project is a bit different. And after you've been working on projects for a while, there may be some scenarios where you don't use a lot and some you use all the time. So you might want to give yourself a little refresher. But I use this as a checklist. So the way you read this, again, we're talking about process groups. Now, this is not considered to be international process groups, but I mean, they are the same regardless if you use them domestically or internationally. So they cover both. So this again comes from the PMBOK Guide, which is the leading documentation on project management worldwide. It's PMBOK Guide, PMBOK Guide version 7. Again, I'm going to send you a copy of this, but you can also, if you're interested, join PMI.org, projectmanagementinternational.org. That's where all information about project management lives, as well as how to pass or information on how to take the PMP certifications exam if you're interested. So for students, there is a sign-up page separate for students, and it's considerably discounted if you use your university email address ID. I think it's like $35 or $38. Normally, it's like I think $185 or $200 to join. So again, it's significantly discounted, and you can get the entire PMBOK Guide once you sign up. It'll be available to you digitally.
For whatever reason, I was issued a .net email address through the university, and I've not been able to get a discount on it because of that.
Oh, wow. Oh, I never heard that. Let me check it out and from some people that I know and see if there's anything that I can do to help you with that.
Okay, yeah, that would be super helpful. Thanks.
You have a .net email address? You don't have a .edu?
Correct. It's at indianatech.net.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see what we can do about that. I mean, I highly recommend it if you can get it. It's such a great discount. I would hate for you to miss out on it. So I'll check into that for you. All right. So process groups, top to bottom. You read this page top to bottom and left to right. So initiating, we look and we see that we need to develop a project charter. And then under initiating, the only other thing that we do is identify our stakeholders, right? Who's going to be included in our projects. And then the other thing that we're talking about tonight is planning. So as you can see, the planning process group is pretty extensive. There's all kinds of things that we need to consider during planning of our projects, like develop a project management plan, right? You have to have a plan. You need to identify and create a project management, a scope management plan, collect your requirements, define your scope, create your work breakdown structure, plan your schedule, define activities, and so on. So it goes all the way down, and each one of these boxes correlates to the knowledge areas down the left-hand side. These are the knowledge areas that represent project management in the PMBOK Guide: integration management, scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communication, risk, project procurement, and then stakeholder management. And up top is initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, and closing. But again, this week we're focusing on initiating and planning. So again, I'm going to send this out so you have a copy of it. That way you don't need to look for it. It is, you can find it. It's readily available if you just Google it, but I have it, so I'll send it out for your use. All right, so I'm going to stop doing that and go back to the assignment. Okay, so that's the discussion. So next is our.
I had a question.
Oh, certainly. Go ahead.
I think you mentioned it last Tech Live. Did you say that they're coming out with a new PMBOK guide?
Yes, they are. Actually, there's many versions of the PMBOK guide, and it just depends on what your organization supports. The new PMBOK guide is coming out in July, and that'll be version 8.
So does that usually mean that the previous ones, and they're not necessarily obsolete, it's just new data, new information that's in the updated version?
Correct. It's new information. That's all it is new information. So for example, as project management changes over time, they update the PMBOK guide to reflect the changes. So I believe most of the changes that will be coming in the next version relate to AI, artificial intelligence, and how that is impacting project management. So the version 7 version focuses on different methodologies, a different way of thinking that incorporates traditional project management along with agile practices and blended approaches, because that's the way the world was moving. Prior to that, version 6, I think I said 7. I was probably I'm wrong. The version I'm showing you that I showed you is version 6. That is usually aligned to a waterfall methodology or traditional project management, and that just depends on the maturity of the organization and how they manage projects. A lot of companies still use waterfall, and it's a really good checklist regardless of what methodology you're using. Again, I use it just to make sure, are these some of the things I should be doing or checking along the way in my projects. But a lot of organizations, I do a lot of consulting for a lot of companies, and it's a lot of multi-billion-dollar companies. And when I go in there, one of the first questions I ask them is, what methodology do you support in your organization? And almost every time they tell me they're an agile shop. And as I sit and go through their work practices, they're not truly an agile shop. Most companies use what's known as a blended approach. So they probably have some mixed waterfall and some mixed agile, depending on where they have the skill set in their organization. And as their company matures and grows, then they grow into that along the way. Now, PMBOK guide, again, the new version comes out in July, and the old version was out maybe 2 years. Previous to that, they used to maybe publish one every 5 to 7 years. But as the world is changing so quickly, they're having to publish updated versions. And again, it doesn't negate the information in the previous versions. It just kind of adds on to it and to match whatever's going on in today's world, to make sure that project managers are going to get the skills that they need going forward. So again, version 8 is really blending in more agile approach along with artificial intelligence as well. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you very much. Okay. I appreciate that explanation.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, and it's hard because sometimes, when you're working and you're trying to align what your organization does with what it says in the PMBOK guide, it doesn't always align because the PMBOK guide is just a best practice, right? It doesn't mean that's the way your company works. but eventually, companies align to it over time because they have to, right? Just like with the incorporation of AI, I don't think there are going to be many companies, if any, that will be able to not be impacted by that going forward. And so they need to be able to blend that in, and companies are already doing it, right? Companies are already using AI, and if you can use AI in project management to help you save time, why would you not want to use that? So you'll see a lot more integration of that starting in July. Usually takes about a year or so before people are fully engaged in the next version. All right. Any other questions before I move on to the first assignment? All righty. So for the first assignment, of course, you need to review the course materials. Then you're going to create a brief presentation with a chart, a graph, or some kind of visual representation outlining the necessary steps for initiating and planning a global project, right? So I'm going to send you the PMBOK Guide version 6. So you can have that as kind of a crutch to help you put that together. And in the assignment, you're going to create the presentation that outlines the necessary steps, as I said, initiating and planning global projects. You're going to follow the instructions in the instructions tab, and it should be 2 to 3 slides in length, so nothing too heavy, right? Simple overview, and in a PPT or PPTX format. And for those of you who don't know, that's just a PowerPoint format. And PPT or PPTX just defines what version of Microsoft you're using. So either one is acceptable. Any questions about assignment 1? Okay. So before I go to assignment 2, I just want to go over a little bit the difference with global project management and traditional project management. So, I've worked all over the world. So I've worked domestically, internationally, and everything in between, right? So, there's global projects are a bit more challenging. So initiating and planning a global project really requires structured but an adaptive approach due to usually added complexity of operating across multiple countries, different cultures, regulatory environments, etc. So unlike domestic projects, global initiatives must address not only traditional project constraints such as scope, schedule, and cost, but also cultural differences like time zone challenges, legal variations, and communication barriers. And because of this, the initiation and planning phases become even more critical to project success, right? So there's a lot more to consider in global projects and a lot more potential constraints with global projects. So the initiation phase really begins when you develop, or when the organization develops a strong business case. Now in the PMBOK Guide, it does not start off with the business case, because the business case is what comes before the project is handed off to you, the project manager, to now execute. And then all those things that were on that PMBOK Guide, page 25, on the different deliverables that are listed there. The business case is something that happens at your senior leadership level as they, go back and forth and determine which projects are going to execute for their budgeted year. Excuse me. So there's always many, many more projects than they have resources to do. And usually your project sponsor, if you're working with traditional project management, or product owners, if you're working in an agile environment, are providing some kind of business case up to your senior leadership, telling them why they should be doing this work versus all the other work that's probably on the list of from your organization. Once it's approved, then it's handed off to you, the project manager, to execute. So again, the initiation phase begins once you have that business case. Now, oftentimes when I start projects, the first thing I always ask for from the business side is the business case document, because a lot of the information you will need to populate all the other deliverables will come directly from that business case document. Excuse me. So this step really defines the purpose of the project and the problem it aims to solve, and the expected value to the organization. So in the global context, the business case must consider international market conditions, geopolitical risks, and economic factors that may influence feasibility. So once the business case is approved, stakeholders must be identified, right? So remember in PMBOK Guide, that first column under initiation, on the bottom of that first column is identify stakeholders. Global projects involve a broader and more diverse group of stakeholders, including international clients, maybe regional managers, regulatory bodies, and cross-functional teams. So understanding stakeholder expectations, their influence, and cultural perspectives is essential for effective engagement. So after we get past initiation, the project moves again into planning phase, as I reviewed before. Again, that is the process group that has the most amount of things that you'll need to consider. And this is where high-level concepts are translated into details and action plans. So scope planning is a critical first step, requiring definitions of deliverables and the creation of what's known as a WBS, or the work breakdown structure. So that's how things are going to flow through your project and in kind of what order. And in global projects, scope must be clearly defined to avoid misunderstandings caused by cultural or language deficiencies. Now, this is followed by schedule planning, which must account for time zone differences, holidays, and coordination delays across regions. Effective scheduling often requires built-in buffers and the use of collaborative tools to manage asynchronous work. Now, I've managed, again, many projects over the last 20 plus years. I also teach how to use Microsoft Project. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a lot of complexities in international projects just alone to be able to support their holidays. Because the US holidays and international holidays are extremely different. And if you need to align when resources are going to be available for your entire team, that can be really challenging all on its own. Because in many countries, they have many more holidays than we do in the US, as well as many more weeks vacation time that they are allowed than we are. So again, a lot of those things need to be considered. So when we're planning our resources, that's another essential component. Global teams require careful coordination of their human resources, considering skill sets and availability, as well as cultural differences. And I have to say, in most companies, the thing that is usually sorely lacking in most companies is the understanding of the skill set that's needed to execute the project and the availability of the resource. Sometimes they don't have software that tracks, what their resources are working on. Everything's done on an Excel spreadsheet, and it's not easy to follow. So this is something that just you need to be aware of, that it can be something that can catch you off guard. I've worked for plenty of companies where I said, well, I need a business analyst. Oh, yeah, we have plenty of business analysts. I'll give you two. But when you start your project, if you don't know what kind of business analyst you need, sometimes they are specialized in certain areas, or sometimes you need a specialized area in your project. And if you don't know that in advance, you could be in trouble, because then you're not going to get the support you really need to execute your project. So also, leaders must also ensure that the appropriate technologies are in place to support virtual collaboration. The communication planning becomes especially important in this context. A structured communication plan should define channels, frequency, and formats while accounting for language differences, cultures, and communication styles. A lot of companies today are using Teams to communicate back and forth with their meetings and so forth, and internationally, or Zoom or something of that nature, and that works fairly well. But one of the things that are certainly an approved method of communication in most companies is email, and it works well when people read them. Problem is, with email, a lot of times people don't ever look at it, right? With the volume of email that people are inundated with, especially if they're leadership individuals who are part of your project, when you have your meetings, you spend the time setting out an agenda and going through all this information, and the likelihood of them to have read that communication is probably slim to none. But it's a perfectly legitimate form of communication with your organization. We just need to think about that, especially in global projects. That's much more difficult. I prefer something like Teams or Zoom, where you can also record the session. That way, if somebody misses the session, you can just forward them the link and they can listen and follow along at their leisure. That's just one way of approaching a global project. Another item that is pretty significant in global project is risk management. So it's significantly more complex in global projects. So risks may include political instability, currency fluctuation, legal compliance issues, supply chain disruptions. And these risks must be identified, analyzed, and mitigated through proactive planning. And similarly, quality planning ensures that the deliverables must meet consistent standards across all regions while complying with local regulations. And that's very difficult as well. So in the US, right, if we're producing a product in the US, oftentimes it's the same standard state to state, or especially if it's regulated by the federal government in some way. So all states have to comply to what those regulations are. But when you're doing a global project, right, not only do you have different customs, you've got other legal and regulatory impacts to your project that you need to think about and ask about. And we should not just assume they are the same, right? So sometimes that becomes a very lengthy discussion. When you're talking about risk, we want to make sure we understand what all of our risks are. So, for example, I managed a project in acquisition for Foot Locker Corporation in Germany for a company called Runners Point Group. We purchased that organization to incorporate them into Foot Locker in Europe. But Germany was where their warehouse was, but they had stores in other European countries. They had them in the Netherlands, they had them in the UK, they had them, Italy, France, blah, 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 right? So, but each one of those all had their own differences on how, supply chain works, where they get things from, when things are able to be delivered. Not everybody was able, has the same kind of mail system. Not everybody has malls where people send products and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of very extensive complexities there, especially if you work in areas that are heavily regulated. So if you're sending things globally in airplanes and so forth that have lithium batteries, there's a whole set of rules for that. Same thing when you're talking about pharmaceuticals, right? You want to make sure that things are won't be exposed to the general public. And again, a million different requirements when you're doing that globally versus domestically. Then if we look at procurement planning, it's also critical. So as global projects often rely on international vendors and suppliers, this requires an understanding of contracts, logistics, tariffs, currency considerations, and additionally, cultural awareness must be integrated throughout the planning process. So leaders must adapt their management and communication styles to different cultural norms to ensure collaboration and trust. So already, again, in the US, if we're doing things, let's say, for example, if your project is you are constructing some kind of building, right? So in the US, there's different rules and regulations, and we pretty much know what they are. And you're procuring your lumber and your HVAC system and electrical and so forth from certain companies, right? So we know where we're getting them from, but geographically, if where your supplier is prone to some conditions that could make your project at risk. So for example, again, Foot Locker is in the middle of Tornado Alley, right? And they have one warehouse for all of North America, single point of failure. So if their warehouse is hit by a tornado, it could really do some serious damage and really, put them out of commission for a long time. So we need to think about that. And other areas of the world where weather is a bit more extreme, again, there's lots of places in the US where tornadoes impact. But we've got other things in other countries. We've got tsunamis, we've got floods and mudslides and hurricanes and earthquakes and all those things that we need to think about globally that would impact your procurement of your products and services in other countries. So really, just to kind of wrap it up, the discussion around that is that initiating and planning a global project requires comprehensive but flexible approach that integrates traditional project management practices with global considerations. So really the success depends on strong stakeholder alignment, clear communication, proactive risk management, and cultural awareness. So by carefully executing those steps, organizations can effectively manage the complexity and increase the likelihood of successful global project outcomes. So I know that was kind of a lot to take in, but there really are considerable differences for global projects than there are for traditional projects, even though, as you saw on the PMBOK guide under process groups and knowledge areas, they kind of outline the same things, but they broadly go over things like communication. It doesn't say, language specifically. That could be a problem, right? We need to make sure that we have somebody who speaks the language, or if the project manager is going to be managing a project that's in Italy, do they speak Italian? Are they fluent in the language? Do they understand the writing in case it needs to be transcribed in some way? Or is part of your project team going to be a translator, right? That's another cost and things that we have to account for. And then that's also an added risk to your project, just in case the translation is wrong, right? That happens. That can happen sometimes. Because even in different countries, there are multiple meanings for similar words because there are different dialects spoken. So that can be challenging. Italy is one place that there are many dialects. India, there's many different dialects to be considered, and so on. And if you're working in IT and technology, the likelihood of you working with somebody from India is probably going to be fairly high, whether they're here in the U.S. or they're in India or somewhere else around the world. So also knowing and understanding those customs, can be an extra part of what you need to do on top of regular project management. Some places in the world, they're extremely complex. I also teach a class for a university that's in Saudi Arabia, right? And those customs are extremely different than what our customs are here. So we need to know, how do we navigate those waters? Because we don't want to do anything that offends those particular students, but we need to understand the differences and make sure that when we design a course that it's geared towards not only the knowledge piece, but their customs, their language, their religious beliefs, etc. So all those things are part of global projects. All right. So the second assignment, let me just pause for a second. Sorry, I can't see when I'm doing this if anybody had any questions or anything. All right, I don't see anything. All right, I'll keep going. The second assignment, again, you need to review your modules and materials in the lesson, complete additional research on how to utilize enablers to improve the probability of global success during initiating and planning, as well as strategies and tools to use if necessary. So you're going to create a 2 to 4 page paper that describes how to utilize enablers to improve probability of global project success during initiating and planning, as well as strategies and tools that can be employed to overcome barriers in initiating and planning in a global project. So that's the assignment in a nutshell. So of course the requirements are writing your paper. You need to also make sure that you're following APA standards, writing standards, and your paper is written in a .doc or .docx format. That's just Microsoft Word. All right. Anybody have any questions about that assignment? All righty. And we're coming to the end. It's probably good because I'm losing my voice. I can feel it going. So again, every week we have this Tech Live session. And just a reminder, you're not required to attend this session. However, you can, I certainly welcome you to attend every week. I'm going to be here whether you are or not. And if you can't be here for whatever reason, you're working or something happens, it's recorded and you just need to be able to listen to it in order to do the Tech Live reflection. Now, the reflection is worth 10 points each. And that requires you to write one paragraph about what you thought, what you learned, anything that transpired during the week, right? So if it's discussion posts between you and other students where you learned something, that's what you want to capture. Again, one paragraph is enough. It doesn't need to be a novel here. So one paragraph, so a good solid 5-6 sentences, and you're good. And I always get questions every term on this particular item because some people say, well, if they're only worth 10 points, I'm not going to do them. And that's your choice, right? If you don't do them, you don't do them, you don't get the points, and you can't make them up. So although, I have seen that this did make the difference between somebody, receiving a B and an A or a C to a B. So it's important, to me, this is easy 10 points. Simply talk about what you experienced for the week. And you can't be wrong, right? Because it's your opinion. All right. And I always get the question too, if you attend the live session, do you need to write the paragraph? And the answer is yes. You have to either attend or watch the recording and then write the paragraph. So with that, I think we'll kind of wrap it up for this week. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Of course, my email is mcpiorazio01@indiatech.edu. If you have a question, I can usually be back to you within 24 hours. If you need some one-on-one time, again, just request it. Send me an email. I'm usually available Monday through Friday between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Saturdays and Sunday mornings. I can be available from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard. Just send me an email with a couple days and times that you're available, and I can check my calendar and find something that works for the both of us. And that way we can jump on a call quickly, and I can help you through whatever issues you might be having. Or again, if you just want to send an email, that works as well. Just a quick reminder, if you're going to be late for anything and you know you're going to be late, just send a quick email and ask for another day or two extension for whatever reason. That way we're covered. I can approve it. To me, that's not, the university, some professors are real strict about that and are sticklers. But for me, I prefer you to spend time on the content and understand the assignment and what it is that you're doing. So if that takes you an extra couple hours, a day or two, I don't have a problem with that. Again, just send me a quick note. I'll approve it. If you're going to be a little late because of the time difference, you don't need to send me a message, right? It's going to be fine. I'm not going to ding you for points if you're 10 minutes past midnight or what have you. Again, to me, the content of your assignment is the most important thing. Because I'm, not only a professor, I do this work. So I want you to understand how it relates to the job, right? Because, if you're not doing this work today and it's your desire to do it in the future, I want you to understand really how this works in the real world. And theory is great, but you need to know how to apply it as well. All right. I think that's all I have for tonight. If anybody has any questions, I'll hang on for a few moments. If not, thank you very much for hanging out with me this evening, and I look forward to seeing your assignments, and I'll talk to you next week.